I know this lawyer only too well. How about you? We all know the lawyer, the scholar of the law. You know, the one who has the knowledge, the one who knows the right answers, the one who can recite what needs to be recited at a moment's notice. We know this lawyer well. Because oftentimes, okay, let's be honest, most of the time, we are the lawyer. It's what the storyteller today wants you and I to understand. We need to be the lawyer because we are so oftentimes the lawyer. You know, the religious types. It's why we're here tonight. We are religious people. And because we are religious, why we go to church when we're supposed to do. We say our prayers. We try to live by the commandments. And of course, well, we most importantly try to mind our own business. And if anybody wants to know why, we have the answers. They just need to ask us. And we will tell them what the commandments are. Why, we know them by heart. We've memorized them. Because we went to religious education classes as well. Yes, we know the lawyer all too well. But we also know that it's one thing to have the knowledge. It's one thing to be able to recite the commandments. It's one thing, as the lawyer is able to do in today's gospel, to be able to say, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and being. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Why, it's one thing to be able to say that. It's still another to be able to do it. It's where the lawyer struggles. It's where you and I struggle as well. It's not easy, is it, for you and I to put our faith into practice? Certainly we have the knowledge. Certainly we know the commandments. But to actually do it on a daily basis, we know how difficult that is, and yet it's within each and every one of us, and all of us have experienced the Samaritan from within us. Every single one of us have had those moments where we are riding the river of mercy. And we don't even know where it comes from. It's from within, and we see somebody that is in need, and we respond. We respond to that need without even thinking twice. We just know this person needs our help. And we stop whatever it is that we are doing. And we don't give it a second thought, and we spring into action. We do what needs to be done. And later we might reflect back on it and say, well, that was a crazy thing for us to do. And yet we did it. Because as we were told in today's first reading and reminded so beautifully why that commandments, those presence of God, it's not across the sea, it's not up there that we have to ask who's going to get it for us. No, we are reminded that this mercy is already on our mouth and in our heart. It's already here within us. And so we, like the Samaritan in today's gospel, we act rightly, we act justly, we act out of compassion, and we do what needs to be done. And then there are those times where we just stand there. Or we choose to go to the other side of the road. And we just stand there and we are paralyzed and we are frozen with indifference at the plight of other people. And oftentimes we will just stand there and watch. And or even worse yet, we'll just stand there and judge. We are struggling immensely as a nation as violence once again unfolds before our very eyes. throughout this past week. And chances are, every single one of us in this room, chances are, why? Because we know the commandments and we know what is right and we know what is wrong. Chances are we've already determined the problem, haven't we? And chances are we've not only determined the problem with our nation, but chances are we've already determined who's right and who's wrong, haven't we? And chances are we've not only diagnosed the problem and determined who's right and who's wrong, we've already decided what it is that we need to do as a nation to improve things. Certainly the one thing that everybody seems to have in common as we hear the news and as we reflected upon it in our own hearts, the one thing we all have in common is the thing we hear over and over again this past week. It has to stop. It has to stop. I bet I've heard that 20 times if I've heard it once over this past week. But how will it stop? You see, the lawyer in us would say, well, it's somebody else's job. It's somebody else's task to make this end. But the Samaritan within us, that's already on our mouths and in our hearts, why, it's the Samaritan that needs to be called forth. It's the Samaritan within each and every one of us that realizes that the only way violence will stop is if we recognize the face of our neighbor. And it's not just the person that physically lives next door to us, but it is the men and women of different color. It is the men and women who speak a different language. It is the men and women who share the same hopes and the joys that you and I share, and the same desires for a safe life here on earth. And so the only way it will stop is if we begin to realize that we are neighbors to one another, and that we need to go and do likewise. Because we know that the end of the story means that it's not over. You see, what happens with the end of the story is that the surrogate lawyer exits the story. And the only one that is left standing there is you and I. And there we stand at the end of today's story, and we realize that even though the story has come to an end, it's not over. There's one more step. We've been given the instructions. We've been given an example of a Samaritan of what it is that we need to do to show compassion, to mercy, to everyone along life's way that we encounter who needs our time, our attention, our listening ear, and our helping hands. We've been given the instructions. We've been shown the way. And so now we realize that the story has come to an end, but it's not over. There's one more thing. We have only to carry it out. We have to go and do likewise.